BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4, all in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to national lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we are awaiting comments from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser as she gives her coronavirus briefing. Plus, we're going to speak to Shelley Sun, founder and CEO of Bright Star Care. She's going to discuss the impact of the coronavirus on the home health care business. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Moving on up, Paul, for day number 2, investors are weighing the latest economic and earnings data to determine the virus's damage to global growth. Crude oil's up above $15 a barrel in New York. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 1.4%, up 38. The Dow's up 1.4%, up 328 now. And the Nasdaq's up 1.4%, up 122. The 10-year is up 530. 6%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 29% at $17.81 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.1% at $17.5720 per ounce. The dollar yen is at 107.61. The euro $1.830 and the British pound $1.2385. Sources say European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde told EU leaders that the euro area's gross domestic product could fall by as much as 15% as a result of the pandemic, and they risk doing too little, too late. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. As we look at a rally in large cap stocks, let's take a look at these small and mid cap shares. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg stocks editor, joining us as he does at this time for what has become my favorite segment. Dave, what are we seeing in the small caps?
Well, we're seeing the smaller companies up more than the larger ones today. The Russell 2000 index higher by 2.3%, and the S&P 500's up 1.3%. Now, many of the Russell's biggest gains belong to energy producers that had become penny stocks, trading less than $1. The biggest advance belongs to Oasis Petroleum, whose ticker is OAS, and its shares have more than doubled. Laredo Petroleum, the ticker there is LPI, is up 52%. And Whiting Petroleum, which began this month by filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, it's also more than doubled. Sleep Number, ticker SNBR, has risen about 30%. The mattress maker's first quarter earnings and revenue were well above analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. And Immunomedics, ticker IMMU, has added 22.5% after winning U.S. approval for a breast cancer treatment ahead of schedule. The ruling was made 3 weeks after Goldman Sachs cut the stock to sell from buy. Now, the Russell's steepest drop belongs to Netgear, ticker NTGR. The maker of Wi-Fi network equipment has fallen more than 16% after withdrawing fiscal year forecasts. And Crux, ticker CROX, has lost more than 6%. First quarter results showed D. Shoemaker's earnings missed estimates for the first time in more than 3 years.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, what we've seen during this crisis is corporations, sensing the long-term economic uncertainty, are rushing to their banks, looking for loans, looking to tap credit facilities, looking for liquidity. And that's given a lot of leverage, Lisa, over to some of the banks. And really interesting. Joining us right here is Paula Seligson, Bloomberg debt reporter.
Actually, I think Muriel Bowser is about to take the podium, so I should just warn you that she may be coming in. But carry on.
Very good. Okay, we'll keep on top of that. So Paula Seligson, Bloomberg debt reporter. So Paula, give us a sense of what's going on between the banks and lenders.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So basically, first to explain the kinds of loans we're talking about, these are these special relationship type of loans that banks offer as groups to their companies. And so in March, we saw this mad dash of companies tapping existing loans and also beginning to raise extra short-term loans, right? There's quarantine, companies need cash, so they're getting it from their banks. And usually this part of the market is pretty sleepy. Things don't change much. But with this shift in sort of supply and demand, all of a sudden, for the first time in years, the banks have been able to dictate some higher prices and safer terms for themselves.
Hey, Paula, now, I think Lisa has, has the mayor started yet?
Yes, I think that she has. I'm so sorry. Paula Seligson will have to rejoin with this another time, covering all things credit related for Bloomberg News. Definitely an issue. Right now, let us hear from the Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser as she gives her daily briefing.
Last week, we know that the White House released guidance around what it takes for cities and states to reopen, and we have looked at this guidance and, as I have stated previously, believe that it is a good framework and in line with what we are looking at locally. And so today I want to share some information with residents and businesses about the criteria we are considering when to reopen and what we're doing to plan for that. Dr. Nesbitt has discussed previously that our thinking is in line with the White House guidance, but there are a few things we need to see before lifting restrictions. And first, that is to observe a consistent downward trend of new cases over a 2-week period. Also, that our healthcare system must be able to treat everyone who needs care without the use of crisis standards of care. In other words, we need to make sure that we're able to provide appropriate care for everyone who needs it. We all know that our community has made too many sacrifices to move forward too quickly or in a way that doesn't prioritize the health and safety of our residents. So we will be deliberate and strategic in our plans to reopen. In addition to meeting this gating criteria, we also know that any effective response in reopening will require widespread contact tracing abilities in order to control and contain the virus. So we need to know who has it and who has been exposed to it. Today, DC Health has a team of about 65 contact tracers, and we are in the process of building that team to over 200 contact tracers. And in the coming week, DOH will make public how we intend to hire for those positions, and we will be advertising for hiring for those positions. But we know that based on our current projections, in order to move safely through phase 1 of the reopening plans, we will need a team of about 900 contact tracers, and plans for how to build that team are underway. Contact tracing alone, however, won't be enough, and we also know that having widespread and accessible testing will be needed. Yesterday, I shared a few ways we're expanding testing A new public testing site is open today. I had the opportunity to drive through this morning at UDC at Bertie Bacchus, which is just across from the Fort Totten Metro. Testing of some asymptomatic individuals and the use of rapid point-of-care instruments in some of our congregate settings is expanding our testing capacity in the district. DC Health has also looked at the collective testing capacity of sites across the city. And right now, combined with public and private testing, we have enough platforms to run 3,700 tests per day. And just yesterday, we learned that our public health lab will receive a new instrument that will double our capacity. So we're pleased to share that news. So now that work continues, we want to make sure that we're able to take full advantage of that capacity. And that means continuing to call on the federal government to support cities and states with procuring all of the resources that we need to conduct massive and widespread testing. So having discussed our work on contact tracing and testing, we want to talk about how we're thinking about our reopening strategies. Of course, one of the very distressing aspects of this pandemic has been the racial inequities and how they play out right in front of our eyes with the data I report each day. And it's not just distressing, it's also very scary to a lot of people and a lot of families in Washington, D.C. And I've said several times that when we get on the other side of this, what that means in D.C. and across the nation is that we have to do better and we have to tackle the longstanding inequities that are causing these disparities. Disparities that didn't just appear during this pandemic, not last year or the year before that, but for decades and indeed centuries. And so as we think about reopening, we also see this as an opportunity, not just to go back to the way things were before, but to do and be better than before. So we're going to have to do better with limited resources, but we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reopen our city in a way that builds a more equitable D.C., and we should not let this opportunity pass us by. It's also important to me that our plans to reopen the city are community-driven and informed by community voices. And so just as the government cannot solve this pandemic alone, we cannot reopen alone. We all need to be working together to make sure that we're listening to our health experts, but we're also listening to the needs of our businesses and residents. So together we need to create a plan that is based on science and tailored to what the Washington, D.C. community needs. So right now, I am putting together a Reopen D.C. advisory group comprised of government and community leaders. This advisory group will have 12 committees that will guide when and how we reopen, as well as how we monitor our progress. There will be a committee of co-chairs, a committee focused on equity, disparity reduction, and vulnerable populations. Public health innovation and workforce is another committee. Transportation and infrastructure, as well as open spaces and recreation, will form 2 committees. Education and child care will be a focus. Government ops, public safety, and criminal justice will be another focus area. Faith, arts, culture, hotels, and entertainment will be a focus area. Restaurants and food retailers will be a subcommittee. Retail and small business, a committee. Human services, social services, and health. And finally, real estate and construction. The advisory group will be advised by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And the work of the 12 committees will be guided by the public health principles for a phased reopening during COVID-19 guidance for governors, also published by Johns Hopkins School of Health. And here you can see that we are focused on 4 guiding values and priorities for the reopened DC group. First, we're going to be focused on health. Obviously, this pandemic has exposed wide health disparities. So this means that we will be thinking about how we improve health outcomes, especially for African Americans and our vulnerable populations. It means helping our small business owners get back on their feet. It also means how we create new job opportunities and new opportunities for our students. Many people have been affected in different ways by this pandemic, physically, emotionally, and financially. And no matter how someone has been affected, we will attempt to address their needs. We want to provide, of course, a sense of hope about what's on the other side of this. Clearly, you've heard me say before this pandemic, we were a growing, thriving city that was very secure financially and investing in the inequities we saw in the city. And we'll be that city again, but stronger and even more focused on all of the things all of the areas for improvement in curing inequities in our city. Of course, in many ways, these priorities and values are not new. In fact, we recognize these priorities, health, opportunity, prosperity, and equity from the final draft of the comprehensive plan that we released last fall. And today, we are sending the updated comp plan to the DC Council. The comp plan will help guide us through as we recover in a way that works for current residents and future generations of Washingtonians. So I know Washingtonians, like I am, are eager to get on the other side of this, and we have to keep working together to flatten the curve. I just commented to my team before we came in here, as I was coming here, it seemed like I saw more people moving around, more people driving, more people going from place to place. And I want to remind everybody very clearly that we are in a stay-at-home posture in Washington, D.C. until at least May 15th. You should only be going out for essential work, exercise, food, or medicine. And then you should be going back home and staying home. So I just want to remind everybody that our orders to wear masks on those essential trips is not a replacement for staying at home. So let us, while we know that things could be worse in the district, we want to save as many lives as possible. And we do that by staying home. So with that, we have time for a few questions today. We do have a hard stop.
We've been listening to the Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser give an update on what they're expecting going forward in the Washington, D.C. region, saying that they are in a stay-at-home posture until the middle of the month and talking about the coordination underway in order to get the economy restarted eventually when there is sufficient testing and other infrastructure in place. Right now, we want to shift the conversation, Paul, to what is going on in what has become the epicenter in some places of the crisis, which is nursing homes and healthcare centers for immunocompromised individuals. And there's no one better for us to speak to than Shelley Sun, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Bright Star Care, which is a national private duty home care and medical staffing franchise. So with a national look at some of those more vulnerable individuals, Shelley, can you give us a sense of how big of an issue the coronavirus and its spread has been for you and your staff?
Thank you so much. I think for us, we came into the crisis with all of our locations Joint Commission accredited. So, hand hygiene and safety protocols were paramount to our day-to-day activities. So we have had, relatively minimal, less than 5% impact of our caregiving staff and our clients, but it's certainly something with the vulnerable population, the most at-risk population that we take care of every day, that we've tried to make sure that we've taken what was a higher standard before and elevated it. We began looking at PPE orders back March 7th, back before, it was really, starting to affect our business and we were seeing any positive cases at all. We were in a 4-week queue to get PPE ordered. We've made available to every frontline worker an N95 mask because we believe it is essential when they're going in and out of a client's home. There's no way when you're providing personal care or skilled care in the home that you can be 6 feet apart and do that type of care. So making sure that we contain the virus and not have it spread to our most vulnerable, keeping people at home, allowing them to recuperate if they get it at home and not further overtax our hospital systems is how we've really tried to lean in and be part of the crisis. I think generally what we've seen across the industry is where you have much more people coming and going or clustering of people. So you've seen nursing homes much harder hit. And in the homes, we had to really, draw a fine line on those where we had deployed PPE early, but some of the hospice and Medicare home health that might be coming in and out of the same home were not. So we required, if they were going to, that we were educating the family on what those employees of other agencies should have if they're coming in and out of the same home. So we kept the client safe, but also our workers that would be coming in and out of that environment. Because the cases that we did see early were from a hospice worker or Medicare home health worker that tested positive. And then we know that our worker had been exposed. In most of those cases, our worker did not contract. But we increased our standards for the home, for our caregiver, but also the partners in the care continuum that we were alongside of on a daily basis.
So, Shelley, have you in the home health care space seen a surge in demand as this coronavirus puts people in hospital, but then maybe they come out of hospital, or maybe people choose home health care versus going into what seems to be a much higher risk nursing home or type of environment?
Yeah, I think you've seen an interesting trend over 6 weeks. So I think we're starting to see a surge in referrals. We're at all-time high the last 10 days in terms of referrals and inquiries for care compared to the 3 or 4 months prior. So I think you're starting to see people come through hospital stays, get ready for discharge, and want to go into a home environment and have that care continuing them to rebuild their ability to ward off anything else and safely transition into the home. During the early stages of the crisis, we saw quite a few of our clients, and we've been tracking it. We service about 15 to 20,000 families in 40 states. We had about 400 clients across the country, kind of early stage, mid-March, stop care. We've seen about 10 to 15% of those since come back as we're tracking that as well, where I think people thought it might be a 2 to 4 week scenario. And now as we look at that, and it's more months, maybe over a year in terms of vaccination and completely being able to kind of return safely out into the environment for the most at-risk population. So I think what we saw is original drop-off, some of that's starting to recover.
Shelley, your company has over 20,000 caregivers and 4,000 nurses, and you're in one area of the economy that may be a bright spot for hiring right now amid an unprecedented surge of layoffs. And I'm wondering how easy it is for you to find individuals to hire at this time and just in general as the president seeks to limit some of the immigration going forward.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, up until we were able to deploy PPE, which happened last week, beginning of the week, we were able to start deploying PPE. I think now it's becoming easier for us to be able to, give the message that we're able to keep our caregivers safe, as well as encouraging to come to or back to the workforce. But I think that's still a difficult call, even though there are jobs available. Many don't have childcare for their children. Schools are closed. Most of our caregivers across the country are working moms, oftentimes single moms. So having the desire to want to serve and take care of our most vulnerable, but at the same time having their own children to deal with. I know round 4, there's some, language being introduced in terms of Heroes Fund. I think that's absolutely critical that we're thinking about our frontline healthcare workers. Right now, that language is limited to only those that are billing the federal, state, local, or tribal governments, and we think that needs to be expanded to anyone who's keeping the at-risk population from overtaxing a health system and keeping them safe and reducing the number of at-risk. And so we'll be looking for that in our engagement with our members of Congress for round 4.
Just quickly here, Shelley, I'm wondering, are you finding that you're having to increase the salaries of individuals in order to entice them back?
Now absolutely, and we have done that and rolled out that capability to our franchisees probably about 3 weeks ago to be adding kind of an incentive type of pay. I think we've called it kind of a safety pay for our caregivers to encourage them to come back when we do know that their at-home costs are higher in terms of having to arrange for childcare that schools are not able to provide today, and wanting to be cognizant of that. And even though, the industry kind of banded together and was successful in getting an exemption for FFCRA, at the same time that Saturday night we, did declare victory with our franchisees. The immediate communication from me to the franchisees was just because we don't have to pay it doesn't mean we shouldn't. If any of our caregivers are symptomatic, not feeling well or have contracted the virus, we should still make sure they're not having to worry about where their next meal is going to come from and how their families are going to be taken care of. So we have stood by that position as a brand and at the local level by our franchisees as well. So I think we're trying to balance the right things. We have a vulnerable population we need to be able to take care of, and FFCRA exemption was critical for us to be able to do that. But at the same time, we want to make sure our workers are well protected and we can recruit the numbers necessary. That's going to become a challenge as more people want to pivot and stay at home. So we're looking for any and all ideas to do that.
Shelley Sun, thank you so much for joining us. Shelley is the CEO and founder of Bright Star Care, talking about the in-home care market, which is facing unprecedented demand as the population deals with the coronavirus. But very interesting to get her perspective on in-home health care. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are higher. Congress is preparing to hand out nearly $500 billion to small business. The Treasury Department released new guidance for the next round of funding for the Small Business Relief Program that emphasizes companies must certify the request as necessary to limit large firms. Meantime, more bad news in the job market. 4.43 million people in the United States filed for unemployment benefits last week. That suggests an April jobless rate of potentially around 20%. 6 coronavirus vaccines are now in the human trial stage. Half of those trials are being conducted in China. That's according to the World Health Organization. In all, there are 83 vaccines in some stage of development. And Netflix is looking to borrow another $1 billion to fund content acquisitions and production. Netflix is coming off its best quarter yet for subscriber growth as people who are housebound spend more time watching streaming services. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple. Are you interested in a challenge?
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
We've never been further apart, yet somehow never closer. At Barclays, we think it's important to celebrate the people making a difference and help support those affected during these extraordinary times. That's why we're supporting the Big Night In appeal. We've kickstarted our donation with £1 million, and if you're a Barclays customer, we'll match your donation pound for pound, up to a total of another £1 million. So if you can, please join Barclays and donate at barclays.co.uk. All donations will be split between the registered charities.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip 3, have a game night. In fact, why not make it a game day? Whether you're quarantined with kids or roommates, nothing passes the time like a game of cards, Pictionary, charades, dominoes, or Never Have I Ever. If you've got the hardware, break out the video game console and enjoy hours of guilt-free gaming. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen From Home on TuneIn.
Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, explore a sports documentary on TuneIn, like Sports Wars, telling the origin stories of classic rivalries, Raise Sports, about the concussion crisis that threatens football's future, and Dunkumentaries, a podcast devoted to the beauty and power of the slam dunk. For these and more, search sports documentaries on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we'll square the dismal economic data with the optimism that we're seeing in markets with our own Barry Ritholtz, who is a Bloomberg opinion columnist as well as founder of Ritholtz Wealth Management. Plus, we're going to hear from Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, with the latest daily briefing on the state of the coronavirus in the region. Right now, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are staying in the green. Investors are looking past the bleak jobs news, and oil prices continue their comeback. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 1.25%, up 34. Dow's up 1.3%, up 317. And the NASDAQ is up 1.3%, up 110. The 10-year is up 3/30 seconds. The yield is currently 0.60%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 30%. That's now at $17.84 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1% at $17.5580 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.68. The euro $1.829. The British pound $1.2383. More than 4 million Americans did apply for unemployment benefits last week, bringing the 5-week total during the pandemic to 26.5 million in the steepest downturn for the U.S. labor market since the Great Depression. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are awaiting the daily press briefing from New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo. We will bring that to you in just moments when we get it. Let's talk markets right here, and there's nobody better to do that with than our good friend Barry Ritholtz. He's a Bloomberg opinion columnist and host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio. He's also the founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management, so he wears a lot of hats. So, Barry, as we take a look at this little snapback in the green here today, how do you square that with, another very sobering jobless claims number of 4.4 million?
Yeah, everybody looks at the weekly jobless numbers as if it's breaking news. And the reality is that really is an amalgam of all 50 states, the data they released during the prior 7 days. By the time the BLS releases this data, by the time the federal government releases the national data, anyone who wanted to assemble that by a state-by-state basis could have done it. So it's kind of old news. I know that sounds silly because everybody waits with bated breath, but you can really reverse engineer that pretty easily a couple of days earlier. Plus, is anybody surprised by this data at all? We've watched 22 million people file for unemployment for the previous month. Nothing has changed. We're still under lockdown. People are still having a hard time getting through to their state unemployment office, so we know the numbers are probably undercounted because of that challenge. As long as we're under lockdown, maybe this starts to flatten out to 4 or 3 or 2 million a week, but we're somewhere between 20 and 30% of the people who had a paying full-time job in March no longer do, and that's a huge number with enormous economic ramifications.
Yeah, I was just looking at a Pew survey that shows that about 43% of U.S. adults say that someone in their household has lost a job or taken a pay cut due to the outbreak. I'm just trying to extrapolate this out as we pair this dismal data with the optimism in markets as to what exactly people are looking to. Is this a bet on the Federal Reserve and U.S. government that they will pump enough money into markets to inflate asset prices and perhaps give a little bit of a lifeline to enough of the population to enable a recovery in fairly short order?
I think it's a couple of different factors depending on your time frame. If you're a short-term trader, you look at a market that falls 35%. That in 4 weeks, that creates a tremendously oversold condition. Once the rubber band gets too stretched too far in one direction, we've seen it time and again. It tends to snap back, at least partway on a temporary basis. No markets go in a straight line. Every bull market has counter trends, downtrends that punctuate it, just like every bear market has these vicious rallies that move in the opposite direction. So that's just a short-term basis. The longer-term perspective is we don't think this is going to last forever. We do see signs that we are either at or near the peak, if not past it for New York. Other states are still on the upswing, but there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know if it's daylight or an oncoming train, which is why we haven't recovered fully.
So it's interesting, Barry. You probably put me in a more cautious stance as it relates to the duration of these lockdowns and quarantines and potentially reopening the economy, if you will. So with that backdrop, is this a market that might be just bouncing along for number of months and or quarters until we really get that definitive view of, okay, we've got the testing or we've got some antibodies or we're closer to that vaccine? Is this something that just says this is going to hold this market in check?
Well, nobody knows if it's late 20 or 21 or early 22 that you could check off all the boxes. Here's the full testing. Here's the contact tracing. Here's the antibody protocol that will allow people who don't have it to at least develop some form of immunity, whether it's full or partial. We don't know. We don't know about the protocols or therapies that turn this from a potentially fatal disease to a manageable disease. Look at things like AIDS. You never get cured of AIDS, but it becomes, there's a therapeutic that manages it. So whether that's 6 months or a year or 2 years, the market doesn't say, okay, the economy is going to halt and we're going to go to zero. It's trying to balance between the short-term drop of earnings and revenue and what were the forecasts for 2019? $175 on the S&P? Yeah. Maybe that drops to, pick a number, $100? We're all spitballing when we're trying to come up with revenue and profit projections for 2020. Right. But I think we're all pretty confident that by 2021, certainly 2022, those numbers come back. Now there's a longer debate to be had about profit margins and leverage and how freely and inexpensively capital has been and debt has been extended and what might happen with the corporate tax rate post-election. That's a whole different conversation. But I think the market is saying...
You know what, Barry? We got to leave it there. I'm so sorry to say. Barry Ritholtz of Ritholtz Wealth Management, as well as a Bloomberg opinion columnist speaking with us right now. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York State, taking the podium to give his daily press briefing on the coronavirus. Let's listen in.
What I hope, just facts. And the reason I do that is because everything we're doing is basically voluntary on behalf of people, right? State government, local government, federal government doesn't have the power to enforce stay-at-home orders. If 19 million people said, I'm going out today, they would go out. But the belief was if they have the facts, if they understand the facts, they'll act prudently in connection with the facts. Now, some of the facts have been disturbing. Some of the facts have been ugly. But those are the facts. And that's my job, is to present the facts as facts. If I have an editorial comment on the facts, I give it to you. But I want you to know that's my editorial comment versus what data or science will say. Also, our Muslim brothers and sisters begin the observation of Ramadan this evening, and we wish them all the best. The hospitalization rate is down again, so that is good news. The overall, if you project the curve, everybody's looking at curves nowadays. If you look at the curve continues to go down. And that's also in the total hospitalization number. Bounces up and down a little bit, but it's clearly down. Number of intubations bounces a little bit, but it's also clearly down. The number of new COVID cases walking in the door or being diagnosed is relatively flat. That is not great news. We'd like to see that going down, but it's not going up either. Number of lives lost is still breathtakingly tragic, 438. That number is not coming down as fast as we would like to see that number come down. And what we're looking at this point is, okay, we're on the downside of the curve. The numbers are trending down. Do they continue to trend down, or do they pop back up? If they continue to trend down, how fast is the decline, and how low will the decline go? In other words, if 1,300 people, or about that number, keep walking in the door, then you're going to have a hospitalization rate proportionate with the number of people walking in the door. So we want to see the number of people walking in the door reduced, the number of new infections reduced, so we hit a low plateau, if you will, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know when it is. And if you look at the number of incoming cases, it's been remarkably flat for the past several days. So that's the best indicator of how containment is working and how the close down policies are working. And over the past few days, we basically flattened at 1,300 new cases a day, which is not great. We'd like to see those new cases reducing even more, and we'd like to see them reducing faster. You then have other long-term questions. Is there a second wave of the virus? We talk about the 1918 pandemic. It came in 3 waves. Is there a second wave? Does the virus mutate and come back? The federal officials are starting to talk about the fall and potential issues in the fall. They're worried about the virus waning somewhat during the summer. Remember, there was talk, will it go away when the weather gets warm? No one's really saying it will go away when the weather gets warm in the summer, but there's still a theory that the virus could slow during the summer, but then come back in the fall. If it comes back in the fall, then it comes back with a normal flu season. That's then problematic because you are then, quote unquote, testing for the flu and you're testing for COVID on top of all the other tests you do. That could be a possible overwhelming of the testing system. If people could have the flu or could have COVID in the fall and they don't know which it is, they could get nervous and start going into the healthcare system, which could then bring back a capacity issue in the healthcare system. So that's something we have to worry about and watch. Nursing homes, they are our top priority. They have been from day one. Remember how the nursing home system works. They are private facilities. They get paid to provide a service. They get regulated by the state government. There are certain rules and regulations that they must follow, and we put in additional rules and regulations on nursing homes in the midst of this crisis. Staff must have appropriate PPE. They must have their temperatures checked before they come into the facility. There are no visitors who are coming into the facility, which is a tremendous hardship, but it's necessary to protect public health. If they have a COVID positive person in the facility, that person has to be in quarantine. They have to have separate staff for the COVID residents versus the non-COVID residents. If they can't care for the person in the facility, they have to transfer the person to another facility. The nursing home is responsible for providing appropriate care. If they cannot provide that care, then they have to transfer the person to another facility. They have to notify residents and family members within 24 hours if any resident tests positive for COVID, or if any resident suffers a COVID-related death. That is a regulation that they have to follow. And they have to readmit COVID-positive residents, but only if they have the ability to provide the adequate level of care under Department of Health and CDC guidelines. If they do not have the ability to provide the appropriate level of care, then they have to transfer that patient. Or they call the Department of Health, and the Department of Health will transfer that patient, right? But that is how the relationship works. The state has very strict guidelines on privately run facilities. They get paid to take care of a resident. That resident, that patient must have a state-directed level of care. If they cannot provide that, they can't have the resident in their facility, period. Those are the rules. We're going to undertake an investigation of nursing homes now to make sure they're following the rules. It's going to be a joint Department of Health and Attorney General investigation. But those are the rules. They get paid to take care of a resident, and they have to do it in accordance with state rules. And if they don't, we will take appropriate action. And the State Department of Health and the Attorney General are going to be commencing an investigation to make sure all those policies are in place and being followed. If they're not being followed, they can be subjected to a fine or they can lose their license. It's that simple. Testing is going to be a major operation that happens from now until the situation is over. It's new, it's technical, it's complex, it's a political football, but testing does a number of things for us. Number one, it reduces the spread of the virus by finding people who are positive, tracing their contacts, and isolating them. That's a function of testing. Testing also, what they call antibody testing, you test people to find out if they have the antibodies. Why? Because if they have the antibodies, they can donate blood for convalescent plasma, which is one of the therapeutic treatments. So you want to find people who had it so you can identify them to donate for convalescent plasma. The testing also can tell you the infection rate in the population, where it's higher, where it's lower, to inform you on a reopening strategy. And then when you start reopening, you can watch that infection rate to see if it's going up. And if it's going up, slow down on the reopening strategy. Okay, so there are different forms of testing for different purposes. All of them are important. It was vital for any state, I believe, to first get a baseline study of where you are on the infection rate. All we know to date is the hospitalization rate. How many people are coming into hospitals? That is all we have been tracking. That's all we know. And then from that, you've had all sorts of anecdotal extrapolations on the hospitalization rate, saying, I think the infection rate is this, I think the infection rate is that. I said, I want to have the infection rate. So we have undertaken the largest, most comprehensive study of New York State to find out what is the infection rate. And that we started a few days ago. Sample size so far of 3,000 people statewide. Let's find out what the infection rate is. We have preliminary data on phase one, and this is going to be ongoing. We did about 3,000 tests. We're going to continue this testing on a rolling basis. We'll have a larger and larger sample. But I want to see snapshots of what is happening with that rate. Is it going up? Is it flat? Is it going down? And it can really give us data to make decisions. We did 3,000 surveys in about 19 counties, 40 localities across the state. The surveys were collected at grocery stores, box stores, etc. And that's important. It means you're testing people who, by definition, are out of the home and not at work. Okay? What does that mean? I don't know, but that has to be a factor that's taken into consideration. These are people who were out and about shopping. They were not people who were in their home. They are not people who were isolated. They're not people who were quarantined, who you could argue probably had a lower rate of infection because they wouldn't come out of the house. These are people who were outside. These are people who were not at work, so they're probably not essential workers, okay? So that has to be calibrated. But what we found so far is the statewide number is 13.9% tested positive for having the antibodies. What does that mean? It means these are people who were infected and who developed the antibodies to fight the infection. So they were infected 3 weeks ago, right? 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, but they had the virus, they developed the antibodies, and they are now, quote unquote, recovered. 13.9%, just about 14%. Breakdown male, female. Female, 12% positive. Males close to 16%, 15.9% positive. Regionally, Long Island at 16.7, New York City at 21.2, Westchester Rockland 11.7, and rest of state 3.6. This basically quantifies what we've been seeing anecdotally and what we have known, but it puts numbers to it. Rest of the state is basically upstate New York, 3.6. It was been about 7-8% of the cases that we've had in the state. Westchester Rockland, we had an initial significant problem. Remember, Westchester had the largest, hottest cluster in the country at one time. 11%, so it's literally somewhere in between. New York City, 21, which again supports what we knew anecdotally. Long Island, 16.7, so it's not that far behind New York City, and it is significantly worse than Westchester Rockland. We've been talking about Westchester Rockland, and Nassau Suffolk basically is 1, but there is a variation with the Long Island numbers. By race, Asians about 11.7%, African American 22%, Latino Hispanic 22%, multi non-other 22%, white 9.1%. This reflects more the regional breakdown. African American and Latinos are in this survey disproportionately from New York City, and New York City is at 21%. So the African American number, Latino number is 22%, but and the upstate whites, they're talking about more upstate, which is 9, but it's 3.6 in the survey. By age, nothing extraordinary here. We did not survey anyone under 18, so it starts with 18 years old, 18 to 24, 8%, 45 to 54, 16, 75 plus, 13, but it's a small percent of the total. Again, how many 75-year-olds were out shopping and about? That is the group that's supposed to be isolating because they are the most vulnerable, 65 to 74 also. But that's the distribution.
We've been listening to New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo with his daily press briefing, and a lot more numbers today, Lisa, from the governor in terms of antibody testing as well as infection rates in different parts of the state. I think the overall trend is that the trend in the numbers, Lisa, continues to be positive, but concerned about kind of plateauing at this level. We need to see the numbers go down even more.
Yeah, and he talked about testing being a political football and why he would like to have such prevalent testing, basically to understand and calibrate the reopening based on whether there's an increase or decrease in potential cases. Again, the testing in the forefront, and yet we don't necessarily have the required testing kits to move forward on that.
No, we don't. And to the end, there are certainly many kind of observers that are looking for the federal government to take the lead here, given that it really will need to be a national testing and even a global testing. But it's really been right now up to the states to kind of manage their process. And so therefore you have a little bit of a differential in terms of how this testing will take place. But clearly that will be key going forward here. So just looking at the market, Lisa, we have still up about 1% on the S&P, up 28 points. A Dow up about 280 points, 23,752. Coming up, Balance of Power with David Weston. He will drive the conversation forward alongside my colleague and co-host Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Sometimes the simplest method is the...
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our after show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air, and they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
I'm Mel Kiper Jr., and to get you ready for the NFL Draft, you can listen to my podcast, First Draft, as Todd McShay, Chris Sproul, and I highlight all the top picks and give you the analysis you need leading up to the draft. Just search ESPN Radio today.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our Bloomberg television and radio audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We're going to start today with the state of the economy. We got jobless claims numbers out today for the United States, indicating just how many Americans now are out of work. And we turn now to Michael McKee. He's our chief international policy and economics reporter for Bloomberg. So, Michael, it was 4.4 more or less million Americans out, 26 million in 4 weeks, and yet some people thought that was actually sort of better than it might have been.
It is amazing, David. 6 weeks ago, we were talking about jobless claims of about 216,000, and now we're talking about 4.4 million, and it seems like good news because we had 7 million for a couple of weeks in a row. It's just astounding. And with the number of jobs, people filing for jobless claims, economists crunching the numbers, and we're looking at somewhere around 22 to 23% for an unemployment rate when we get those numbers on May 8th, and that compares with the high in the Great Depression, 1933, 24.9%. We could easily be above that. This week was the week that is the reference week for the jobs report. So it may not be worse than that. But I mean, when you're grasping at straws for good news, global PMIs, the United States comes in better than Europe, with numbers that would have been astounding to anybody a month ago. 36.9 for manufacturing, 27 for services, the composite 27. And those are so much higher than Europe. In France, the composite 11.2, the Eurozone 13.5. You can't model the destruction of the economy with numbers that low because it's never been done before. We've never seen numbers that low. But the European Central Bank chief, Christine Lagarde, today suggested we could see 15% collapse in the European economy for the quarter. So the numbers that we're talking about are just absolutely astounding at this point. Now, those numbers that you're seeing there are quarterly numbers. They're not on an annualized basis as we do in the United States. In the United States, we're looking at numbers like 30 to 40% because we project it out over the course of a year, David.
So So, Mike, as you say, the numbers are just astounding wherever you turn, the United States or Europe. How much can we rely on the numbers? Because I've seen some reports, for example, the United States with respect to jobless claims, there's such an influx of people filing that some states can't keep up with it, and they're actually estimating. They may not be actual numbers for some states, such as, for example, Connecticut.
That's why they think that we're going to see these kinds of numbers, the multi-million numbers of jobless claims filed, for several weeks to come, because states have to work through the backlogs. We also have the issue of companies that have been trying to hang on with people on the payroll. Do they fall off if those companies decide to give it up? So we may see these numbers for quite some time, and that makes it hard to calculate what the overall impact is going to be. The other question is, how long does it last? When do people start to go back to work, and do we see the Paycheck Protection Program lure some people off of unemployment and onto payrolls again? Very hard to guess what all this means, especially since the models never took anything like this into account.
Yeah, models were not designed for this sort of phenomenon. Go back to Europe for a second that you mentioned with the PMIs and also Madame Lagarde's remarks about the GDP. Did those PMI numbers indicate anything about differences among countries? For example, Germany versus France.
It shows that Germany was a little bit stronger, but that everybody has been affected. When you look at the German numbers, of course, the manufacturing powerhouse there, their manufacturing number 34.4 is not that far above France at 31.5. And those numbers seem a lot stronger than the service numbers. But that's because they count supplier delivery times lengthening as good news. Usually it means that you can't get the parts because there's so much demand. Now there's no demand at all. So there's no parts coming in, so supplier delivery times are infinite, and that means the numbers are a little bit higher than they even should be. But the southern nations, which aren't represented in specific numbers today, but the overall European number suggests that they're growing really, really slowly. That's of course going to be the big issue for the Eurogroup meeting this afternoon, as the leaders of the Eurozone try to figure out how to bail out those countries, how to keep their heads above water.
An extraordinary story. Thank you so much for telling it. That's Mike McKee, our colleague at Bloomberg. And now, for Bloomberg First Word News, we go to Mark Crumpton.
Thank you. As you and Michael were just referencing, the numbers are staggering. In the last 5 weeks, 26.5 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits. Last week's total was 4.4 million. If everyone who asked for benefits is counted as unemployed, that could mean an April jobless rate of about 20%. Stay with Bloomberg. We'll continue to follow this story throughout the day. 100 meat inspectors at the U.S. Department of Agriculture have tested positive for the coronavirus as the illness ravages the nation's meat processing plants. The infections add to the growing concerns about the safety and the viability of the nation's meat supply after several major U.S. factories closed in recent weeks due to the outbreaks. France says it will lift its coronavirus lockdown countrywide on a case-by-case basis rather than region by region. The government is working on a detailed plan to lift restrictions progressively on non-essential travel and revive its economy from May 11th, following weeks of confinement to prevent the coronavirus from spreading. The virus has killed more than 20,000 people in France. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, the world of investing and investment banking has changed, maybe forever. We're going to talk to the man who is right in the center of all of it. He is Ralph Schlosstein, who runs Evercore. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is a social distancing tip.
Keeping your distance from others is important in slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are some fun things to do alone. Read a book, take a walk, unpack your suitcase from that trip you took last September, paint a self-portrait, catch up on a TV series, do a puzzle. Remember, we should all stay home to lower the risk for everyone. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The 2020 NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
With the New York Jets, that's going to be the hot spot for this draft early on, right? We're going to see if a team's going to try and get up into that spot and see if they want to...
Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, TuneIn has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every round one selection.
Oliver is the only guy in this draft that has Aaron Donald potential. Who's going to get up and take him?
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home, and when your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come. Search NFL Draft to listen. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
For a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Get the latest breaking news alerts and listening suggestions for new stations and podcasts. Let TuneIn keep you in the loop with push notifications. Just go to your device's settings and allow push notifications from TuneIn to get live alerts and recommendations on the audio you want to know about.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective Podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective.
Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
Areas across the state to expand their daily testing capacity. The command center also recently sent 3,500 swabs and tubes to South Coast Health Systems, who will increase their daily testing capacity by 400 tests a day, and also sent 3,500 swabs to the Cambridge Health Alliance. With respect to hospitalizations and hospital capacity, which I know is an important issue for all of us, the command center is communicating daily with the hospitals across the Commonwealth, as well as with medical professionals to monitor the capacity in our system. As of yesterday, there were 3,977 patients hospitalized statewide for COVID-19, and that includes a little over 100 new hospitalizations. In total, 9% of the total number of COVID-19 cases are currently hospitalized, a number that's remained relatively stable over the past few days. Out of 18,000 available hospital beds statewide, ranging from ICU beds to field hospital beds, over half are empty and available for patients. These numbers mean that we continue to see a slight increase in the number of people needing medical attention due to COVID-19, but they also show that our healthcare system planned well and is managing through this crisis. That's good news. As we know, Massachusetts is the home to one of the strongest healthcare systems in the world. From our academic medical centers to our terrific regional and community hospitals across the Commonwealth, these healthcare facilities have been well positioned to help us withstand the surge. We also planned for this. The command center worked with the healthcare community to model what this uptick in cases would look like, and then we built a plan and we've been executing on it. We've worked with our academic medical centers, our community hospitals, and our medical teams to craft a plan that is flexible enough to dramatically increase ICU capacity, dramatically increase bed capacity, and at the same time create step-down capacity so that patients who didn't need to be at an acute level anymore could be moved to a lower level setting. All in all, this process has given us the structure and the flexibility and the capacity that we need here in Massachusetts to work our way through the surge. It also means our hospitals are well positioned to deal with and take care of the other elements of care that are so fundamental to the work that they do every day. To some extent, that's part of what we want to talk about today. Many hospitals have reported a reduction in patients seeking care for other serious medical conditions, like heart problems, dialysis treatments, and cancer treatments. We know these medical conditions didn't stop when COVID-19 picked up. And our hospitals and our healthcare providers have made accommodations for COVID-19 to ensure that they can also care for the other healthcare problems that they come across every day and do it safely. The purpose of all that surge planning and response was to ensure that our healthcare system would not be overrun and could continue to respond to other emergency needs. People should still call their doctor to talk about their health needs and go to the hospital if they have an emergency. People have worked hard to set up telehealth services, which they've been using to help people talk to clinicians distantly using either video chats or phone conversations to determine whether or not, in fact, they need to be physically seen by somebody. We've also added the Buoy Health System, which has tracked over 85,000 connections so far with people who've used it for self-diagnostic purposes. And if people, based on their data and their submissions, needed to speak directly to a clinician, that's been made possible. And of course, call 911 in an emergency to get to a hospital if you need immediate help. We don't want people getting sicker or exacerbating an illness or an injury, and it's important that people are cared for when they're sick, whether that's for COVID-19 or for something else. Just a few days ago, as part of the regular calls we have every day with hospital CEOs, we discussed this concern over patients delaying life-saving treatment out of fear. And I asked the CEOs to do what they could to get the word out. Many of our facilities have worked together like never before since the beginning of this pandemic, sharing innovative solutions and essential equipment. And the Commonwealth and its people have benefited tremendously from this collaborative approach. And having been involved in the healthcare world for much of my professional career, I can tell you that these hospitals and these organizations are typically, pretty competitive with one another. And it's been remarkable to see them work together to make sure that they, you, and we have the capacity and the ability to serve both those who are dealing with COVID-19 and those who are dealing with the other issues in medicine that are much more traditional to what they see every day. And it's terrific that the 6 Boston teaching hospitals participated in a series of TV public service announcements asking residents not to delay care. I want to thank Tufts Medical Center for taking the lead on the project and the local video production company Last Minute Productions for donating their time. The 60 and 30-minute PSAs will be played on all Boston TV stations starting today. I want you folks to take a look at the video, and then after it plays, I want to ask Dr. Michael Apkon, who's the CEO of Tufts Medical Center, to come to the podium and share a few thoughts.
This is a special report from Bloomberg Radio. You have been listening to Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts with the latest COVID-19 update from the Commonwealth. The governor is saying once again, as he did yesterday, that they want to wait this out and that they are trying better to inform the public of what to do. Again, this has been a special report on Bloomberg Radio. Now we return to Balance of Power with David Weston.
To behave normally. It relies on a reasonably stable and well-valued stock market. It relies on high availability of credit. It relies on a reasonable judgment or sense of where the economy is going, and it relies on CEO confidence. The last three are not present right now. There's not readily available credit. We have no idea how the economy is going to evolve over the next 6 to 12 months. And as a consequence, CEO confidence is low. So our largest business, M&A, is clearly going to be quite negatively affected. The good news for us is that we've invested heavily in businesses that help where we can advise companies on their balance sheets, either in restructuring or advising them on debt or on equity capital raising. And so we're very busy, even though we're spread out among 1,800 offices around the globe. But the businesses that I just described aren't big enough for us to offset what will be a pretty significant decline in M&A activity for sure.
Ralph, if you look out, if you can, over the next 12, 18 months, do you expect that you will grow much more in things like advising on workouts, in restructurings, in dispositions, which one would think would grow to make up for at least a good part of the M&A? Do you have the opportunity to grow into that part of the business?
Yeah, those parts of our business are going more than flat out, and we're actually repurposing some of our bankers to become restructuring bankers and financing bankers because it's the same set of skills in many circumstances. So no question, those parts of our business are going flat out. They will grow very rapidly over the next 12 to 18 months. But as I said, they're not the same size as our M&A business, so overall, it's hard for them to make up for what will be an inevitable decline in M&A. But by the way, if we do get a reasonably rapid recovery and some settling down, it's quite possible that M&A activity will pick up again, 6 to 9 months from now. It will just require some visibility about the direction of the economy and settling down of markets before that happens. We still have lots of active dialogue with our clients because there are many things that they still want to do. It's just, everybody is reluctant, that old phrase, you don't want to catch a falling knife.
Do you expect that there will be as many bankers at Evercore and more broadly in investment banking 2 years from now as there was, again, 1 year ago?
I do, actually. My guess is 2 or 3 years from now we'll have more than we have today because we've, consistently taken market share. Our business model of independent advice without any conflicts with our clients hugely resonates with both large and small and medium-sized mid-cap companies. So even this last quarter, we once again gained market share in the advisory business. Our advisory revenues were up 10%, and the average of the 5 large U.S. firms, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, B of A, and Citi, was down 13%. So we're taking share And in order to continue to take share, our only input to our revenues is people, and so we will continue to grow.
And finally, Ralph, what about sectors? Do you see a difference in sectors among the companies you deal with? For example, right now, it seems like telecom is more needed than ever. Online is needed more than ever. Certainly, the tech sector seems to be rising. Do you see, as you deal with your clients, that there's more openness, more confidence, more opportunity there than perhaps in some other more traditional areas, such as manufacturing, materials, things like that?
Well, there are going to be a massive number of changes in our in lots of sectors as a result of this. Number one, we're all learning that we can be highly productive without being all in the same place. That has implications for center city real estate. It has implications for, in my view, family leave policies. So in the service sectors, these are going to be very meaningful changes, in my view. In manufacturing, you're already seeing rethinking of supply chains. Do I really want to have one supplier for a critical part to my manufacturing process that comes from an area that could be affected by a pandemic? So I think there are going to be massive changes. Clearly, technology is inevitably going to be a continuing growing proportion of the S&P 500, in my view.
Right. Okay, Ralph, thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. That's Ralph Schlosstein. He's president and CEO of Evercore. And this is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Whether it's another day of market misery, pandemic emergency, or both, one thing will still go right.
We have the latest world and national news.
Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager bring you the most accurate coverage.
The White House is looking for additional ways to support the economy.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
We continue to watch equities around the world.
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It is time now for our Stock of the Hour, and as Las Vegas stands up nicely on some speculation about reopening some economies. And Kaylee Lyons, she's here with all the news.
Yep, David, Las Vegas stands is up more than 11% today. Now, it did report first quarter results that were by no means pretty. Revenue fell 50% in the quarter, but that was better than analysts anticipated. A lot of the weakness has been in Macau, 95% drop in visitors in Macau over the course of the COVID-19 COVID-19 lockdown. That is a big chunk of their business, and of course that weighed in the first quarter. The optimism today, though, coming in the fact that Las Vegas Sands sees a rebound coming in the summer as China lifts those travel restrictions and all that pent-up demand comes flooding back. Now, of course, JP Morgan, for example, upgraded the stock today. A lot of analysts agree with that idea that things are going to turn around in that major market. You're seeing stocks the likes of Wynn Resorts, which also gets more than half its revenue from Macau, also rallying today. So a lot of optimism in the casino space as we do look to see these economies reopening. Now we turn from Macau to Las Vegas. Of course, Las Vegas also a crucial market for many of these companies, and Las Vegas has yet to reopen. Much more coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are posting gains. The Dow is up 309 points, NASDAQ climbing 97, S&P 500 up 32 points. West Texas Intermediate crude is up over $17 a barrel. Well, COVID-19 continues to grip the economy. 4.4 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week. That brings the 5-week total during the pandemic to 26.5 million. Economists are telling us that those numbers suggest the unemployment rate this month is topping 20%. In earnings, drug maker Eli Lilly didn't suffer as sales of its blockbuster diabetes drug Trulicity helped revenue jump 15%. And being a retailer for essential goods during the pandemic is boosting sales for Target. The discount chain is on pace for same-store sales growth of 7% in the first quarter. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The global economy is reeling from what's going on in response to that pandemic. At the same time, equity markets aren't reacting quite the way you might expect them to. Welcome now Catherine Mann. She is the chief global economist for Citi. Before that, she also served on the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House and was chief economist at the OECD. So, Catherine, thank you so very much for being with us. Really appreciate it. And let me pick up on exactly that point. Obviously, the economic numbers are terrible. We saw more unemployment today. The PMIs out of Europe are terrible, and we probably haven't seen the worst of it yet. At the same time, equity markets, while down, are not down as much as one might think. Are the equity markets right that are properly assessing what the government's willing to do to save the economy, or are they underestimating the risk?
Well, it's really good to be with you, David. So I think that we can definitely see that if we go back a little bit of it, a couple months or so, the markets were in free fall. The markets were absolutely in free fall until the Fed came in with its program, not the rate cuts, that didn't help, but with the first round of alphabets of backing, and then the markets still were on the bottom until the fiscal authorities came in with their huge program. So it's no question that the equity markets are responding to the combination, the double-barreled Fed and monetary policy, on fiscal policy. On the other hand, it's also the case that when we look at where they bounced back to, we sort of say, okay, they bounced back to where they were in the middle of 2019, maybe not to the highs of the beginning of 2020. Middle of 2019, where do we think the economy is going to be in 12 months? Are they looking forward to that? Because if they're looking forward to that, they shouldn't be where they are now.
And Catherine, one very interesting point that you've made is this. Everybody talks about, is it a V, is it a W, is it an L, is it a U, things like that. Your point, I believe, is it depends on where you look, and specifically at what sector. It may be a different letter for different sectors.
Yeah. So a couple things. First, different letters for different sectors, and it's also different letters depending on what your time horizon is. So let's talk about the sectors first. Something like a manufacturing, much more like a V shape, because, when the factory is shut down, you run down the inventories. When you have to ramp up production to make back up your inventories. Maybe not as much. We are tempering the V's a little bit because the supply chain continuity matters. Your factory may be open, but the next factory on the supply chain may be closed. So, you've got some tempering of the V shape in manufacturing through that relationship and the fact that the whole world is not opening up at the same time because the virus didn't arrive at the same time. The other set of sectors, though, for example, are ones where consumer choice matters. We call it getting back to play, meaning people are going out to entertainment, restaurants, sporting events, travel, tourism. Of course, people in those sectors they are the workers in those sectors. They're the employed people, but it matters whether or not there is consumer demand for those unstructured activities, things that you do by choice. Nobody's forcing you to go take a cruise. And so until that really gets back, those sectors, the workers associated with those sectors, and therefore the economy as a whole, is going to have a drag. It's going to be L-shaped for them. And so you get these very different shapes depending on the sector. You add it all up to an economy, and some of them are a little bit more V-shaped because there's a little bit more manufacturing, a little more tech maybe, and then other economies that might be South Korea or Taiwan. And then there are other economies that are extremely tourism dependent. Those are facing L's, something like a Thailand, Singapore, UK. These are economies very dependent on consumer choice sectors. The other perspective, though, that I think is important to remember is depending on what is your time horizon as an investor, if you are very kind of a near-term, short-term time horizon, you're going to see these just amazingly collapsing economies on a quarter-to-quarter basis. So into the second quarter for advanced economies for most of the emerging world, except for Asia, which is being changed by China. Tremendous deterioration. But then huge rebounds in Q3, for different parts of the world. So there's a lot of arbitrage in there from quarter to quarter. On the other hand, if you're kind of a long-term investor, you ask the question, when does the economy get back to the peak of economic activity as measured by, say, January 2020. How long does it take? Probably takes 12 to 18 months. It means for the economies as a whole, things are bad until you get to 2021, midway through 2021. So what does that mean to you as a corporation if I told you your revenues weren't going to be back to their peak for 18 months? That's a pretty tough thing to be thinking about if you're a corporation.
It is indeed, Catherine. One of the remarkable things, certainly I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime, we saw this week, was oil, with futures contracts actually trading well into the negative numbers. Was that specifically about some of the technicalities of trading in oil and having to take delivery, or was it indicating something more broad? And specifically, does it raise the specter of deflation?
Good set of questions there. So the negative numbers are a combination of technicality and real things, meaning where are you going to put it, where are you going to store it. If you can't find a place to store it and you've got a contract and you don't want to take delivery, then you're going to have to sell that contract, and that's how you get to negative numbers. But of course, underpinning this is oversupply, the price war and a lot of supply being generated by both Saudi Arabia and Russia, as well as a lot of other producers. That supply is out there on the high seas and is going to arrive at ports in another month or so. So even when the production cutbacks that were agreed to get implemented, there's still an awful lot of supply out there. There's also this question about whether or not the production cutbacks are going to be sufficiently significant enough to offset, which is a collapse in demand for product. So it's a combination of the politics and policies about oil, the price war and so forth, and the production associated with that, collapsing demand. And then the technicality of there's no place to put it, and I don't want to take delivery, so I got to sell. So that's the technicality of it. If anything, the oil markets probably are giving us a better read on prospects for the global economy, at least with regard to travel, tourism, and those factors that are important drivers of oil demand and other related product demand. Whereas the equity markets are giving us a view of how policy is backstopping them, different degrees of backstop.
Right. Catherine, finally, we're going to hear from the central banks again, with the Fed, for example, next week, and a series of other central banks. We've heard an awful lot from them already. They've done an awful lot to support the economy. Is there more to come? And if we essentially lapsed over to monetization of debt as a practical matter?
Well, the Fed has made it very clear that they feel like they have as many instruments as they need, depending on the situation. My guess is that I think they knew that there was going to be this degree of fallout associated with when you close down the services sector of your economy, and services, account for 70% of consumption, production, and employment. Not all services, shut down. Of course, yours didn't, and mine didn't, because here we are. But a good portion of the economy did. So they knew that was going to happen, and they didn't want to have the financial fallout associated with that real side fallout to precipitate and create a downward spiral associated with a GFC 2.0. So they know the degree of the challenge. They still have a lot of opportunities to get involved in the various markets, the financial markets, bond markets, through basically everybody. You could call it a policy put on the entire portfolio. But that's exactly what had to happen in the near term. So they have what they need to do going forward. Whether they're going to come up with more programs, I doubt it at this point. I think they've got enough programs. They need to do the implementation.
Okay, Catherine, really appreciate you being with us. That was terribly helpful. Catherine Mann is the Global Chief Economist for Citi. And coming up here next, we're going to talk with a congressman from Georgia, the state where the governor has said he's going to start opening up some businesses as of tomorrow. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. But first, we're going to...
What began in China has expanded...
Oh, just there, Dave. Smashing. Great. Really? No, night, Steve.
Yeah, see ya.
Built to take the big knocks. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung Rugged range.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
The loungewear essentials that ease you into your comfort zone. The Fitbit that helps you step up your fitness goals. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can enjoy being the best possible you. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Yesterday was just one of those days. I was running late to dinner, so I had to do my makeup on the bus. But my favourite shirt got ruined when I spilt my foundation all over it. What a mare. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
on the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be one team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Tomorrow.
very important that individuals do their part as well.
We're talking about the guidelines from the coronavirus task force. Actually, they laid out those 3 phases, and one of them, as I understand, to get to the first phase, you had to have a decline in the number of instances and the number of deaths over a 2-week period. Have you had it in Georgia? Because I believe you've not. So is the governor complying with the guidelines that President Trump set out?
Well, and I think that's where the president was, what he was alluding to yesterday, is that the guidelines had called for some of the businesses that Governor Kemp has agreed to open tomorrow, such as the salons, such as the tattoo parlors, that they would not open until phase 2, and he's got them opening in phase 1. So I think that's where the difference is the president saying, I strongly disagree, that ought to be in phase 2 instead of phase 1. But, again, keep in mind the idea was that we would that we would flatten the curve, that we would have our hospitals to be prepared and ready in case we do have a peak, in case we have a surge. And the governor feels very strongly that we are prepared, that our hospitals are prepared, and that if we do have a peak or a surge, that we can handle that peak and surge.
Congressman, one of the big questions on everyone's mind is, as we start to open back up, will we know when we have a problem? How long will it take to find out? And that takes us back to testing. The bill that's coming up before the House later today is going to include